There is a golden rule in global trade. Never hold a market hostage unless you control the supply. Donald Trump just broke that rule, and Mark Carney is making him pay for it in the most unexpected place imaginable. Imagine pulling up to the window on a random Tuesday. You've had a long day. You order your usual combo meal. You reach for your wallet, and the voice on the crackling speaker says, "Sorry, we're out of fries." It sounds like a joke, a localized glitch. It isn't. Donald Trump tried to corner Canada. He wanted total absolute leverage over the North American food supply. He demanded Canada surrender its agricultural exports on his exact terms under the threat of catastrophic tariffs. He thought he was playing 1980s real estate. Mark Carney didn't blink. Instead of fighting on cable news, Canada's Prime Minister made one quiet, mathematically devastating move. And now the consequences are spreading across America like a localized earthquake. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you what changed, who panicked first, and why this bizarre showdown over potatoes is about to hit your wallet, your investments, and your daily life in a way you never saw coming. Here is what just happened. 48 hours ago, Donald Trump walked up to a podium in Washington and announced a sweeping new executive order. He claimed Canada was price gouging American buyers on agricultural exports. He claimed America was being ripped off by its closest ally. And then he singled out potatoes. It sounds ridiculous to the untrained ear, right? A global superpower picking a fight over a root vegetable. But the U.S. fast food industry relies on a massive invisible high-speed pipeline of frozen French fries, hash browns, and raw processing potatoes flowing south from Canadian provinces. We are talking about Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, Manitoba, and Alberta. Trump demanded a hard cap on Canadian export prices. He threatened a massive 100% border tariff if Ottawa didn't immediately comply. He wanted a win. He wanted to look like the tough guy forcing America's neighbor to subsidize American fast food conglomerates. He expected Ottawa to panic. He expected a desperate, pleading phone call from the Prime Minister's office. He didn't get one. Instead, Prime Minister Mark Carney did something entirely different. He didn't issue an angry statement. He didn't threaten to sue in the international courts. Carney simply ordered the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, the CFIA, to immediately implement a comprehensive internal review of all outbound agricultural shipments to ensure strict 100% compliance with phytosanitary safety standards. Every single truck, every single train car, every single shipping container. They didn't officially close the border. They just slowed it down, way down. Within hours, the highly tuned supply chain snapped. You need to understand how tightly wound the American food system really is. Fast food restaurants do not have massive freezers in the back holding a month's worth of inventory. They rely on just-in-time delivery logistics. The fries you eat on a Friday were likely crossing the border on a Tuesday. When those refrigerated trucks stopped crossing the border into Maine, Michigan, and North Dakota, the clock started ticking. Today, major U.S. fast food chains are scrambling. Distributors are issuing emergency warnings of immediate nationwide shortages. Franchise owners are staring at empty freezers. Trump thought he was squeezing Canada. Instead, he just locked up the entire U.S. fast food market overnight. You might be sitting there thinking, it's just potatoes. Surely America grows enough of its own food. How bad can it really be? Let me show you the receipts because the math here is brutal and it heavily favors Canada. Receipt 1, the volume trap. America eats a staggering amount of French fries and a massive irreplaceable chunk of that comes directly from Canada. Look at the trade data from just the last few years. Canada exports roughly $2.7 billion worth of frozen French fries globally, and the vast majority of that goes straight into the United States at another $500 million in fresh potatoes. Companies like McCain Foods and Kentish Farms operating heavily out of Canada are the lifeblood of the global fry market. Over 68% of Canada's total potato production is dedicated to processing. This isn't a side hustle for them. It is an industrialized multi-billion-dollar machine optimized for the American drive-thru. When Trump made his threat, he assumed America was the only buyer that mattered and that domestic farmers in Idaho or Washington state could just step in. But agriculture doesn't work like a light switch. You cannot magically conjure millions of tons of specific processing potatoes overnight. Receipt 2, the border chokehold. Here is what the cameras caught today at the border crossing in Woodstock, New Brunswick, and at the Pimina crossing in North Dakota. Miles and miles of refrigerated 18-wheelers just sitting there. The diesel engines are idling. The exhaust is filling the air. They aren't sitting there because Canada banned them from leaving. They are sitting there because Carney's government suddenly decided to strictly enforce every single agricultural safety check on the books. They are checking for microscopic nematodes, they are checking soil samples, they are verifying paperwork with excruciating bureaucratic precision. Legally, under WTO rules and the USMCA, Canada is completely within its rights to ensure food safety. Practically, it's an absolute unassailable blockade. You are watching a masterclass in weaponized bureaucracy, and the US cannot do a single thing about it without violating its own trade agreements. Receipt 3. The Wall Street panic. The market felt the shock wave instantly. Look at the tickers for the big fast food conglomerates. Within 24 hours of Carney's move, stock prices for major U.S. drive-through chains started sliding into the red. Investors are pulling back. Why? Because Wall Street knows exactly what Trump doesn't. Fast food is a game of pennies. The profit margins on a burger are virtually non-existent. The French fry is the highest margin item on the menu. It costs cents to make and sells for dollars. It is the exact thing that makes a combo meal profitable. If you take away the fry, the entire business model collapses. You cannot run a profitable McDonald's, Wendy's, or Burger King on just meat and bread. Receipt 4, the corporate revolt. And the phone calls have already started. Reports are leaking out of Washington right now. The CEOs of America's biggest restaurant groups are not calling Ottawa to complain. They are calling the White House. They are furious. They are telling the Oval Office in no uncertain terms that if this Canadian supply line doesn't open up by the weekend, they will have to start crossing items off their menus. They will have to put printed signs in their drive-through windows explaining to angry, tired American voters why their favorite, cheapest meal is suddenly gone. Trump used the tariff as a weapon. He thought it was a sledgehammer that would smash Canadian resolve. But Mark Carney understands that in the modern hyper-connected economy, supply chains are a scalpel. And Canada just made the first perfectly placed cut. This is exactly why Trump is losing control of the narrative and why his administration is currently panicking behind closed doors. He manages everything by impulse. He sees a problem. He yells. He threatens a tariff. He expects total obedience. It worked in New York real estate in the 1980s. You bully the contractor until they drop their price. It does not work in global trade in the 2020s. Trump is trapped by his own tactics. He escalated with threats. But you can't intimidate a global supply chain. You can't bully a frozen potato. You can't negotiate with a rotting vegetable in a delayed truck. When he threatened those tariffs, corporate America didn't cheer for his tough guy routine. They panicked. Here is the simple, devastating cause and effect chain that Trump triggered. He threatened the border. Companies immediately paused their purchase orders. The supply lines got nervous. Freight companies raised their shipping rates to cover the delay times. Wholesale prices spiked instantly. Franchise owners passed the cost to the consumer. Voters felt it in their wallets. And now the American consumer is going to pay the ultimate price for a political stunt. Trump wanted to look strong for the cameras, but right now inside the West Wing, they are scrambling. They didn't have a backup plan. They don't have a strategic petroleum reserve, but for frozen fries waiting in an underground bunker somewhere. American farmers cannot instantly pivot to cover a multi-billion-dollar shortfall. Potatoes take time to grow. They require specific soil, specific weather, and massive specialized processing plants that take years and billions of dollars to build. Trump picked a fight he absolutely cannot win quickly, and the longer it drags out, the worse he looks. His leverage just backfired. He tried to hold the U.S. market hostage, assuming Canada would pay the ransom just to keep the trade flowing. Instead, Canada just changed the locks on the building. And worse for Trump, his political allies in the American Midwest, the agricultural heartland, are starting to get incredibly nervous. If Canada is willing to play this hardball over potatoes, what happens when they decide to look at American exports heading north? What happens when Canada starts strictly inspecting American corn, American soybeans, or American dairy? Trump is discovering that in a trade war with your closest neighbor, everyone bleeds. But the guy who started it takes the blame. This is where you see the stark, undeniable difference in leadership. Look at Mark Carney. He doesn't fight like Trump fights. You will not see Carney rage tweeting at 3 a.m. You won't see him calling names from a podium or making wild, unsubstantiated claims about American farmers. Carney uses systems. He uses alliances. He uses the cold, hard, unforgiving math of global markets. He turns pressure into leverage. You have to remember who Mark Carney is before he stepped into the political arena. He ran the Bank of Canada. He ran the Bank of England. He spent years at Goldman Sachs. He understands global financial flows, logistics, and market vulnerabilities better than almost anyone else on the planet. He knows exactly how fragile the American consumer economy is to sudden unexpected shocks. While Trump was screaming about tariffs on television, Carney was quietly picking up the phone to Europe and Asia. Sources claim the Canadian government is already fast-tracking export subsidies and logistical support to route those stalled shipments. If America doesn't want Canadian agricultural goods, Japan does, South Korea does, the European Union does. Canada is already a top exporter to these regions. Carney is building a firewall around the Canadian economy. He is proving that Canada has actual tangible sovereignty. He is sending a very clear, very dangerous message to Washington. We are not your warehouse. We are not your backup generator. We are not your 51st state. If you want stability, you pay for it with respect and fair trade. If you want our resources, you respect our rules. Carney didn't raise his voice. He raised the cost of ignoring Canada, and the markets trust Carney. That is the critical difference. When Trump speaks, the markets brace for chaos, volatility, and uncertainty. When Carney moves, the markets adjust to a calculated new reality. Carney is playing a long game strategy. He knows that Trump politically needs a quick PR victory to feed his base. Carney doesn't need a PR victory today. He just needs to hold the line, keep his composure, and wait until American corporations force Trump to back down to save their own profit margins. He is letting Trump's own domestic pressure cooker do the work for him. You need to step back and look at the massive picture here, because this is not just about fast food. It's about history shifting in real time right in front of our eyes. What this means for you sitting at home is profound. Even if you don't care about Canada, even if you haven't eaten at a drive-thru in 10 years, Canada touches your life every single day in ways you don't even realize. They provide the crude oil that gets refined in the Midwest to put gas in your car. They provide the uranium that powers American nuclear plants. They provide the aluminum in your vehicle's chassis. They provide the lumber in the walls of the house you are sitting in right now. If Donald Trump can break the food supply chain on a Tuesday just to score cheap political points on television, what happens next month? What happens when he gets mad about energy? What happens when he decides to slap a 100% tariff on Canadian electricity flowing into New England during a winter freeze? Prices will skyrocket. Jobs will vanish. Entire industries will grind to a halt. This potato standoff is a warning siren. It signals a complete collapse of U.S. leadership and global trust. Alliances are not just pieces of paper signed by men in suits. They are the invisible, vital threads that keep your groceries cheap, your gas tank full, and your lights on. Trump is taking a pair of scissors to those threads, convinced he can just tie them back together later. And the rest of the world is simply stepping back. They are watching America isolate itself. They are watching a global superpower pick reckless fights with its closest, most reliable, most integrated ally over absolutely nothing. The era of America dictating terms to the rest of the world without consequence is ending, and Trump is the one accelerating the collapse with his own two hands. There was a moment at Davos years ago before Carney was prime minister where he was asked about the future of global trade. He said something that went largely unnoticed then but rings like a deafening bell today. He said, you cannot eat leverage. You cannot heat your home with a tariff. Eventually, reality always outbids rhetoric. Trump is trying to feed America with rhetoric. Carney just showed him the reality. Trump didn't negotiate. He demanded, and the Canadian border simply stopped. So where does this go from here? The tension is thick and the clock is ticking on the American supply chain. There are three ways this plays out in the next 72 hours. Scenario A, the quiet surrender. This is the most likely outcome based on history. The corporate pressure becomes entirely too much. The fast food lobbyists, Wall Street executives, and panicked franchise owners corner Trump in the Oval Office. They show him the internal polling that proves American voters will violently turn on him the second their menu prices double and their fries disappear. Trump quietly drops the executive order late on a Friday night, claims he won a massive, beautiful secret concession from Canada, and the border checks go back to normal. Carney lets him have the fake PR win, knowing Canada actually won the war and secured its sovereignty. Scenario B, the escalation. This is the part where normal leaders usually calm it down. But Trump doesn't do calm. He doubles down to protect his ego. He orders the U.S. Border Patrol to start seizing Canadian assets or heavily taxing other imports. Carney, utterly unbothered, responds by cutting off a critical raw material like lumber to the housing market or even crude oil to Midwestern refineries. The dispute spirals violently from a localized food shortage into a full-blown macroeconomic crisis, sending both countries spiraling into a recession right before an election cycle. Scenario C, the unexpected reversal. Canada simply decides the US is no longer a rational or reliable partner. Carney signs a permanent multi-billion-dollar expedited agricultural pact with the European Union and the Indo-Pacific. The Canadian supply chains, the massive processing infrastructure, are permanently diverted away from the United States. America permanently loses its cheap, reliable source of food imports. Fast food prices in the US stay permanently high, altering the American diet and economy forever. This uncertainty is dangerous. And right now, no one, not even in the White House, knows how far Trump is willing to push this bluff. We are watching a fundamental historic realignment of North America. Donald Trump thought he could bully Ottawa for a quick headline. Instead, Mark Carney exposed the deeply fragile reality of the American economy. One quiet move at the border, one administrative order, and the U.S. market froze in its tracks. Do you think Carney is brilliant for protecting Canada's sovereignty, or is he daring Trump to overreact and crash the entire system? Drop your take below. I read every single one of them. And subscribe right now if you want the next update on this crisis before the mainstream headlines even catch up to what's really happening. History is moving fast, the board is flipping, make sure you're watching.